A Sweet Taste of Cake by the Descendant. Last chapter. Thrice upon a mattress. The gingerbread house was complete. It sat carefully inside of its box, awaiting delivery. The cake stood in the showcase room, listening to Pinkie Pie as she seemed to be both rehearsing her lines for the heartwarming pageant and speaking out everything she wished to do and see in Canterlot. She would not be with them until late tomorrow. The young mare instead would be returning for most of the day to the rock farm where her parents awaited their daughters and the joy that came with their presence. Carrot lifted his face and turned back to the doorway. The holiday cards all hung across the door frame before him. He focused past the frosting that stood still upon his nose and saw the card from Clyde and Roxy that hung there. The many happy greetings reminded him that Pinkie Pie's family was now in some ways theirs as well. The mares made a little noise of surprise. Carrot looked up to see Pinkie showing Cupcake something that had been growing there all along the day. Ponies had been passing by and had been drawing in the frost that sat upon their window. Even as the mares looked on, Pinkie Pie's friends arrived, each ready to trot to the station. Pinkie motioned to them before they entered, asking each to draw a little representation of themselves in the frost. As the mares and Dragon Whelp entered, Cupcake motioned to them, winking as they each noticed the white dollop of frosting upon Carrot's nose, imploring them not to give away that they saw it there. Carrot had forgotten about it. It simply had become part of him, something else that she added to his life. Cupcake marveled at this, even as the giggles of the girls sent small waves of confusion over his figures. All too soon there was a flurry of hugs, and with that, the young mares and their dragon escort departed Sugar Cube Corner. The Cakes watched them go through the large picture window. To their surprise, Pinkie Pie came bouncing back and smiled to them from the other side. As her scarf dangled around her, they watched as she too added something to the frost, smiled to them once more, and then bounded off into the snowy streets to the railway station beyond. Cupcake and Carrot lowered their heads and stared into the frost where dozens of little ponies seemed to march and dance. 3 ponies and an alligator stood close together, each one of them looking very much like the residents of Sugar Cube Corner. Cupcake leaned to him, let herself rock and sway in tune with her husband as they pondered the window. Soon the last of their customers with holiday orders had arrived, made their holiday wishes, and departed with their treasures. With that, they closed Sugar Cube Corner to the world, leaving only the magical lights shining along the picture window to indicate their cheer. Wrapping themselves in their scarves, they went out into the cold and gray, heartwarming eve afternoon. The box containing the gingerbread house perched carefully on Carrot's back. Ivory Script was living in her own small home now, her parents having departed for Florida during that year. The large mansion where she had lived all her life had gone up for sale. Now, she lived in a more modest abode in the center of the city that she served. The long afternoon was spent in the pleasant company of their oldest friend, the mayor of Ponyville, so comfortable and relaxed in her presence that she let the gray come out of her mane and let her natural pink shine through. As the time came for the reveal of the gingerbread house, Cupcake led her into her own dining room. There, a beaming Carrot lifted the box to reveal the structure. As Ivory looked it over, she smiled to Cupcake, motioning to the prideful stallion that stood nearby. Cupcake nodded her head, once more acknowledging the dollop of frosting. Ivory embraced them both, carefully avoiding the frosting upon Carrot's nose even as she giggled. Confusion sat upon him once more. Promises were made. Ivory would come to Sugar Cube Corner the next evening and spend dinner with them. She would bring her gifts tomorrow, possibly having found what awaited her deep within the gingerbread house by that time. With another embrace, they left their dear friend and went out into the wintry afternoon. As they went, they stopped to listen to songs that lifted from carolers or watch skaters in the big mill pond. They lingered just for a moment upon the snowy bank across the mill, the very same spot where they had first spent pleasant time in the company of one another. The big mill wheel continued its cycle, even as the building itself sat empty of ponies, as large icicles formed on the wheel and the festive greenery sat in each window. The air hung over the ice-covered river coldly. With a shiver, Cupcake leaned into her husband, seeking his warmth. Their scarves could offer little comfort against the frosty air. With that in mind, they were off to the big house that stood beyond the lampposts, leaning to one another as they went. As they entered the house, they were greeted, the flash of Cupcake's eyes telling all within, not to mention that little bit of frosting that still sat resoundingly upon Carrot's nose. Carrot watched her family greet each other, interact with one another. Her brothers talked with him, and he did his best to make small talk with the powerful business money and the army officer. His mother, now a dear matron to that family, greeted her son with a long hug and kiss that avoided the frosting. She too promised to come around to the bakery for their dinner that following day. Still, it seemed somehow less. As the activity swirled around the house, Carrot found himself in the kitchen, missing a certain older stallion who had once stood there with him, making sandwiches and speaking in a rumbling tone. Before long, they were off again, as their extended family asked them to come around in the morning for breakfast and the opening of presents. They received their hugs and kisses. Cupcake could only giggle, and as the nieces and nephews her brothers had given them joined Ruby's in giggling at Carrot as they wrapped them in their forelegs. The confusion upon her husband's face only growing as the frosting forgotten caused the grown ponies to smirk and hide their expressions. The restaurant in the Hotel Seabiscuit had a wide buffet laid out. As they found their favorite table, the waiter could only jump in small surprise as he looked upon the face of Carrot, not knowing if he should mention the frosting or not. The room was largely unoccupied, giving them the welcome silence. As the fire flickered in a large stone fireplace, the waiter brought them their drinks. He removed the old plates as they slowly enjoyed all the flavors and temptations that the buffet offered. As they spoke, a band played in the next room. Little remembrances crept into their conversation. Before too long, they found themselves sitting there, with their hooves upon the table, sitting upon the hoof of one another. Carrot spoke about small things. The week now ending, their new ovens. Wonder if she would like to try the southwestern reaches this year for a vacation. As he did, he stared down into the rose-colored eyes of his wife, lost in them as he had been for more than a decade. She lifted her voice to answer, asked if they would have to put in a lift to access the attic when the new codes came into play. Spoke about how nice it would be not to have to adjust for an uneven heating anymore. Wondered if they would let the ponies who were not on their honeymoon use a certain bungalow that she remembered very fondly. As she did, she stared up into the green eyes of her husband, past the frosting that he was now oblivious to. They said goodbye to their favorite table, favored the waiter with a generous tip as the crowds began to arrive. With that, they left the restaurant in the Hotel Seabiscuit once more. To their surprise, it was actually a touch warmer than it had been when they escaped the chill over the river, and a light snow was now falling in the absence of wind. It seemed like an excellent evening for a walk. They decided to enjoy that night together before they headed to the dance hall. It was almost too perfect. As the lights of decorated homes shone out into the darkened night, they could be forgiven for perhaps thinking that some divine being had made it that way just for them. Luna was on top of the moon, watching the two and cheering them on, going, "Bow! Bow, you two!" The dance hall where they had first met had been rebuilt. A pony named Blues and his friends having once more filled the fabled structure with light and vibrancy. They slowly made their way there as the flakes of snow gently drifted around them. And holiday music, mixed with dances and other songs of all varieties, lifted from the distant structure. They stopped as they went to peer over the holiday displays in the windows of the closed stores, swaying together as they leaned upon each other tenderly. As they crossed through the snowy streets, they stopped to look upon the buildings, each one alive with decoration, candles and lights. Cupcake had been walking along towards the next group of lights, their hues already falling over her when she felt an alien sensation. The feeling that he was not near her, the absence of his body touching to hers. She turned around and panned the street. There, she found him looking down a perfect scene of newly fallen snow. She watched him, saw that he was contemplating something that stood within the white. With that, she saw Carrot plant his hoof into the snow in a slow, deliberate movement. He lifted his head to look at her, his eyes squinting to catch her in the light of the lamppost. She trotted back, already knowing what she would find there, her heart leaping at the knowledge. He had, of course, found one of her hoofprints in the freshly fallen snow. He had selected the best one, the one that was as perfect as he could select, and pressed his hoof into it. The two prints stood there before them, merged to one symbol. As she stood next to him, she wrapped it in a heart, the snow moving around her hoof placidly, yieldingly. They stood there, staring down into it as he placed her head on his shoulder, the flakes falling through the lamplight around them. Beyond them, music drifted out of Blues' new Blue Flag Club, the old dance hall seeming to fill with the soft tones of the notes that caught among the decorations that adorned it. As he began to nuzzle beneath him, draw her face along his, there was only one ornament that called to her. Only one decoration that caught her interest. Enough. It was time. She took his hoof, wordlessly asking him to follow her to the windows of the nearby carousel boutique. Gently she drew him closer until the reflections stood upon the windows, the cakes staring back at themselves as the lights in the window pane caught them in a myriad of colors. He looked upon her smiling reflection, and then peered deeper at his own, and tried to figure out what she was telling him. He arched his eyebrow, stared at his reflection deeper, growing slightly perturbed as he began to giggle. Cupcake lifted her hoof, and pointed with a wide grin to the dollop of frosting that still sat upon his nose. Carrot crossed his eyes and concentrated and realized it was still there. As he realized why Ivory, their family in the big house, and the waiter had all been giggling and smiling at him, a blush came over his face. He had utterly forgotten about it. It had become just another part of him, something that he had placed there and made a part of his life. He turned to her to try and apologize for embarrassing her, but at once he was made aware that was not her concern at all. Not in the slightest. As he placed his head in her hoof and guided it down to her, Cupcake rubbed her nose to his, the small gentle motion setting their familiar and welcome feeling between them. She kissed his lips, moved up slightly, and planted another kiss on his nose. She then reached the frosting. She took tiny bits of it, nibbled at it, and then simply began to lap at him. She let the warmth of her tongue slide up the space between his nose and under his eyes. He closed his eyes, felt her tongue as it traced the spot, let the sense of her closeness and the heat of her body enter him. In a few motions it was mostly gone. As he opened his eyes, he saw her standing there before him, a happy little smirk on her face. She stuck her tongue out at him, her cheeks and eyes wrinkling up into the devious smile that had long ago captured his heart. In an instant, he knew what she was doing. He knew that the flavor must still rest upon her tongue. He moved to answer her offer to share it. As the flakes gently fell around him, he lowered his lips to hers. Together, they tasted the sweet frosting between them, its flavor so much like a sugar cube long since dissolved. Once more, one whose memory they had savored ever since. No, it was more than just that uncomplicated flavor. Mama, are those performing CPI? No, thank you. They're just kissing. Come on, honey. The ingredients of the frosting filled them with more than just a simple taste of sugar. It was stronger, more practiced. The frosting was much more than just sugar. just as their love had only grown in time. It had been beaten and whipped, but it had become that much better. They lifted from the kiss. Soon their heads were touching to one another once again. The long, slow motions letting their familiar feel drift through one another. In a moment, any thoughts of dancing at the club fell away, became an instant impossibility. The snow melted around them for the heat of their kiss. As they stared softly to one another, they knew the welcome sensation that drifted from their heart to the heart of the other. An implour raised itself in their eyes. A tenderness grew in his. With that, they both knew in a happy instant to where they were being drawn. As the music drifted from the club beyond, they turned toward the street leading back to Sugar Cube Corner and the warm bed within. She trotted ahead of him for a second and then began walking backwards, staring at him with her little smile. She touched her nose to his again, and then she turned and trotted ahead, his heart leaping at the sight of her bouncing, buoyant steps. She looked over her shoulder at him, her cheeks still lifting in her cunning smile as she began to weave through the lampposts, asking him to pursue her. He began his little chase, Cupcake looking back to him as he slowly gained upon her, her laughter guiding him more than the sight of the rosy mane and beautiful coat of his wife as the lamplight fell over her. He listened to her hose going across the cobblestones, the sound muffled by the snow, whilst her mane bounced as the snow swirled around her. She stopped and let him catch up to her for an instant. His lip fell to hers for a lingering moment before she giggled again and was off once more, turning back to him as his smile grew. She brushed the snow from his mane as they gained the doorway of Sugar Cube Corner. As he did the same, she laid her head back to his chest. He let her lie there, his head upon hers, until she lifted it and looked at him once more, another inviting touch of their muzzles as they entered their small home. Their scarves barely made it to the drying rack before they were cantering up the stairs, Cupcake still giggling as he went. The wonderful sound filled the stairwell as she removed her earrings. As she finished, she placed them on the table at the head of the stairs, felt his hoof upon her, slowly tracing the length of her stifle, coasting slowly down the length of her rear leg, and then back up again. She turned to her husband as he gained the first few steps, lifted his touch from her. She leaned forward into another kiss, and with that, they entered their bedroom. A moment later, they came trotting back out again, both laughing. Piggy had opened the upstairs windows to let the moisture of her accidental deluge escape the bakery. The bracing chill that filled the upstairs sealed it against their intentions. No matter. They would make their own heat. With the windows closed in all of the upstairs room, and Gummy just seemed to be safe and happy upon his warming rock, they trotted back downstairs. The two trotted down to the stairs and to the kitchen so quickly, and filled with expectancy that a few holiday cards fell from the doorframe with the rush of the air, not to be discovered until the next morning. As they lit the ovens and left the doors open so that even as the room was left dark, the blue flames wafted about merrily in their confines. The fireplace in the parlor roared to life, and as the blinds were closed, the futon and its mattress were arrayed, the pillows carefully set. The light of the fireplace fell over them, joined in its illumination by the heart-warming tree that stood in the corner. As they lay upon the mattress and pillows, the lights upon the tree shimmered over them, cast them in its colors. They pondered it for a good long while, studying the trees and the presents beneath it as they lay against one another, nuzzling their faces to one another, and wrapped their hopes deeper and deeper together. The ornaments upon the tree, many as old as their marriage, were each filled with some happy thought or cherished memory of those they knew and loved, and the times they shared together. They laid their heads to one another and thought of all the ponies whose gifts awaited them tomorrow. thought of all of their faces that were attached to the names upon the little presents beneath their tree. As they did, it filled them with a sense of completeness, wholeness, a feeling that all was well in their world. They sensed that their love had indeed grown to include so many, that they were part of a great circle, one that would be drawn here to their little home inside the bakery tomorrow. That was tomorrow. This evening was for the two of them alone to share. Carrot felt her lift her body, felt Cupcake place her forelegs across his shoulders. Her kisses fell in a wobbling trail up his withers and along his neck. The cadence and soft feel of her lips went across his cheek before catching his ear between them. Slowly she nibbled at his ears, first one, then the other, not hurting or biting them, simply letting her lips embrace them, her teeth touching to them just enough to show her affections. Carrot felt the wondrous sensation of her light blue frame to his, the heat of her body over his. With that, her lips once more planted kisses to him, her hose signaling to him to roll to his side. As her mouth reached his neck, her hose ran along his chest, his shoulders, and her teeth caught along the aged bow tightly. It was weathered with age and perhaps fraying, but it was something that she had given him. It was like the frostings he had placed upon him, the small line of white still showing there where it had rested. It was something she had given him, and so he kept it, cherished it. Gently, she touched her mouth to it over and over, undoing the knot with small movements, carefully releasing it from the amber neck which it lay. As she went, she first pulled at it, and then let her mouth find some spot upon his neck, to lay a small kiss before it once more tenderly pulling upon the caveat. Cupcake alternated these movements in turn until he pulled free, the bow tie hanging in her mouth as she laid above him, her hose lying upon his chest as she gazed down over her husband. Even as it still dangled in her mouth, Cupcake touched her head to that of Carrot. She stood and smiled to him as the bow tie swayed in her mouth. Seemed to even chuckle wordlessly as she did. Cupcake moved slightly, parted the pillows, and looked across to Carrot as she sat up and settled his eyes across her. She dropped his bow tie across the pile of pillows, across the deepest part of the futon. As the cravat slid from her mouth, she looked deep into his approaching eyes, signaling to her husband the spot where she wished to be made love to. As he wrapped his forelegs around her, she leaned backwards into him, just as he had done once upon a distant and happy time when flour had poured over them. As he rested against his chest, he touched his head to hers, his hose stroking her forelegs tenderly and gently, the awareness of his welcome touch sinking into her. In the kitchen, the blue flames fell down inside the oven, the room having met the temperature they had wished. The little sounds of their home, the small segment of the world they had built together over long years, these floated into their parlor as she sank deeper into her favorite place, the place in the world where she had felt at most at home, safe and loved. As he laid further into his chest, he wrapped her closer, let his lips fall across her neck once more, pressed to and nibbled gently upon the space between her ears. After long moments of their embrace, he felt her nudge him, pressed against him with an entreaty for his actions. As Cupcake leaned backwards, she did so without hesitancy, trusting and knowing that he was there for her, feeling the sweep of his body as he lowered her to the mattress. Her head rested in his foreleg until her husband arranged the pillow beneath her, Carrot not placing her upon the cushion until it stood just so, made it so that she seemed to hang above the mattress, then lay upon it. Her head tilted to the side, her forelegs folding to her chest as he returned to face her, standing over her, looking upon her supine presence. "I love you, Mrs. Cake," he said as he grabbed her off her hose, standing over her and staring down into the rosy eyes that he long adored. "I love you, Mr. Cake," she answered, kissing his nose and pressing a waft of his mane from his gentle eyes. She sought his eyes, held his wandering hoof to her face for just an instant before ushering it off to his explorations once again. As his touch floated across her, she slowly rocked her head back and forth from one side of the pillow to the other, giving small sounds of contentment as he lingered upon her body with small circles and lacy patterns. She ran her hoof up to his foreleg, reaching up until her own rested upon his face. He leaned against it, let his head settle to her hoof. The warmth of the fireplace fell over them, and the lights of the tree caught across them. They could not know, as they gazed upon each other, that this was the last year that children's toys would be absent from under that tree. They could not know that this would be their last year for many years that they would be able to sleep in on a heartwarming day, that soon foals would be calling to them at early hours, or leaping into their bed and begging to be allowed to go downstairs into the parlor. They had been through so much together, suffered so much to be together. They had learned so much, learned from each other, from those who their love had been brought to their lives. They had been made stronger, strong enough now that the deep magic sensed their strength, knew that they were ready for what would happen. The magic knew that they were strong, resolute, that they had planned, made strong stands against that which they feared. The magic knew that they would accept loss, hardship, could get through it all because they relied on one another, made a long journey together. The magic knew that they would never stop trying their hardest to live up to the task that had been set for them, that they had never stopped loving one another, had never broken down because of the strength they shared. The magic knew that they were ready, that they could accept those whose lives were so very different from their own as part of theirs, just as they had for a young mare who had filled their house with love and laughter. The cakes were ready, had shown themselves to be ready, and the magic moved to answer their long-spoken invokes. They could not know that with their acts that night, the seeds that would be scattered would not find the barren rocks and sandy ground that had laid there over the long decade of uncertainty. They could not know that this night the deep magic moved within her, and fertile soils, rich with life, opened at its call. They could not know that the magic had awakened two souls and was ready to answer their pleas that he had long spoken, was preparing to make their love corporeal. Magic had waited, knew that for the two earth ponies raising twins would be hard enough, a test of their skills. It also knew that racing two foals of races different from themselves, a unicorn filly and a Pegasus colt, would be harder still. There would be challenges for them, heartbreak, fear, frustration, but also happiness, joy, and love. These emotions and more would meet the new lives as they created this night, but among them, love stood the tallest. The greatest among them was the love that carrot cake and cupcake would drape over their falls all their long lives. The magic had waited until they were strong enough, smart enough, and learned and loved. They never stopped trying, and now they had won. Magic had conceded this round, saw that they were ready for this task, and applauded them victory in the game of this. They could not know it was so very happy for them, and that it waited patiently that much longer to bestow them with their prizes. They of course could not know these things as they lay there. All that a happy cupcake knew was that her husband was leaving soft kisses across her neck, her chest, her barreled, her body arched, calling for his. But he was lost in the act of draping his kisses across her. Instead, he denied himself that pleasure that much longer, to focus on the small, happy sounds that were lifting from her. She raised her hoof, called his lips back to hers. Something caught in the firelight, in the lights that cascaded off the tree. Seated there, she pressed her lips to the resonance between his nose and beneath his eyes, grabbing the last of the frosting that still clung to his muzzle. With one more deep, long kiss, they chased the taste between them, like cats on their tongues. With another long, loving glance, Carradine continued to lay his affections upon his wife. As the feeling of his soft touch swept over her, she wiped her head across the pillow. As the taste remained, it was not the flavor of the frosting that stood out upon her lips. No, a different taste jumped to the fore. A taste that Cupcake adored more than anything that had been prepared in that kitchen over their lives together. Their happy lives. Their journey. Carrot crept down her body, his lips touching to her chest, her stomach, navel, and farther still. As Carrot did, he gathered a taste that washed the frosting from his mouth until it receded as a happy memory. No. A different taste sat there, one that was dearer to him than anything else in this world. A taste drifted across both their senses as Carrot lingered his lips across her. It was a taste sweeter than any in the world. A taste as wonderful and intoxicating as any meal that they had ever eaten, yet at once as familiar to each other as the feel of their shared touch and glance of their eyes. It was a taste of themselves, a taste of the friend, a taste of the lover, a taste of the partner, of the husband and wife, of the two ponies who had shared this journey, a taste of this other self. It was a taste that they had cherished and embraced more than anything else in this world. A taste that had long washed through them and bound them to each other and closer to one another. A sweet taste of cake. The end. Nothing more I could say about this fic. It just was this good. I chose this fic for my first live read because, well, it's rare to find any of the Descendants' work out there as a live read, as most people will go for Fallout Equestria or something else bigger. But I also chose this for my first live read because this scene is so tender and special. It's a really great fanfic and really has a lot of power to it. I hope through my reading of this, you guys got a chance to see why I enjoyed it so much. Next week, we are going to go into the alternate universe. A world where Celestia had gone insane. A world where Luna rules the day and night. Where the banners of the moon hang upon high of Canterlot. A world much like the Equestria we know and love, but darker. Yet lighter at the same time. These are the same ponies with the same feelings that you know and love, but a different experience waits them. Next week, we present the great Impartiality! Lyra Heartstrings, Carrot Top, Derby, Telly, Raindrops, as they begin their adventure in a world known only as the Lunaverse. Join me, won't you? Thank you.